Every spring, the same thing happens to the same growers. They spend 8 weeks nurturing seedlings indoors, careful watering, grow lights, the whole setup. The weather turns warm. They move the plants outside, and within 48 hours, the plants look terrible. Leaves bleached white, stems collapsed, some of them never recover. That is not bad luck. It is not a weak batch of seedlings. It is the predictable result of one of the most confidently given and most incomplete pieces of gardening advice that exists, the standard hardening-off protocol that every guide repeats without explaining what is actually happening inside the plant during the transition. Here is what most guides never tell you. Moving a plant from indoors to outdoors is not one stress. It is 5 simultaneous stresses, each of them affecting a completely different biological system, and the standard advice addresses maybe 2 of them. The other 3 are left unmanaged, and those 3 are the ones doing most of the damage. By the end of this video, you will know what all 5 stresses are, how to manage each one specifically, and a modified transition protocol that gets your plants outside faster, with less damage, and into productive growth significantly sooner than the standard 10-day approach produces. Drop your country in the comments and tell me which plants you are preparing to move outside right now. I want to see what the community is growing and where. Let us get into it. Section 1. The 5 terstis why the standard advice tier fills. The standard hardening-off advice tells you one story: gradually increase sun exposure. Start with 1 hour, add an hour each day, build to full outdoor exposure over 7 to 10 days. That advice addresses one of the 5 transition stresses a seedling experiences when moved outside. 1 out of 5. Here are all 5 because understanding each one changes how you approach every day of the transition. Stress 1. UVB radiation shock. Indoor light, whether from a sunny window or a grow light, contains almost no UVB radiation. UVB is the short-wavelength ultraviolet component of sunlight that does not penetrate glass and is filtered to near zero by most artificial grow light spectra. UVB is also the specific radiation wavelength that triggers the plant's protective response, the thickening of the leaf cuticle and the increase in UV-absorbing flavonoid compounds in the leaf tissue that allows the plant to tolerate full outdoor sun exposure without damage. A seedling that has never been exposed to UVB has essentially zero UV tolerance. The gradual sun exposure of the standard hardening-off protocol is the right idea, but most growers do not understand that the mechanism it is working with is specifically UVB tolerance building, not general light adaptation. Stress 2. Transpiration rate mismatch. Indoors, humidity is relatively constant and air movement is minimal. A seedling's stomata, the microscopic pores in the leaf surface that control gas exchange and water loss, are calibrated to these indoor conditions. They are partially open most of the time because the humidity gradient between the inside of the leaf and the surrounding air is small and manageable. Outdoors, humidity is often lower and variable and wind is present. When indoor calibrated stomata encounter outdoor conditions, they cannot close fast enough to prevent water loss at the accelerated rate the outdoor environment demands. The plant loses water faster than its root system can replace it, even in soil that is adequately moist. The wilting that most growers interpret as drought stress during the transition is almost always transpiration mismatch. The stomata simply have not recalibrated yet to the new environment. Stress 3. Root zone temperature shock. Indoor potting mix in a home environment sits at 68 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Spring outdoor soil, even on a warm April day, is often in the mid-40s to low 50s at 4 to 6 inches of depth. When indoor warm roots are placed in contact with outdoor cold soil at transplanting, root cell membrane function is temporarily impaired. Cell membranes at lower temperatures become less fluid. Transport of water and nutrients across membranes slows, reducing the plant's ability to replace the water it is losing through transpiration exactly when that replacement is most urgently needed. Most growers never notice root temperature shock because it is invisible above ground, but its effect, reduced water and nutrient uptake for the first 3 to 5 days after transplanting into cold soil, is felt in the entire plant's ability to manage the other 4 stresses simultaneously. Stress 4. Wind mechanical stress. Indoor seedlings have never experienced mechanical stress from air movement. Their stems are soft, elongated from growing toward relatively distant light sources, and calibrated to still air conditions. The Thigmore morgenesis response. the cellular strengthening response that builds stem tissue density in response to physical movement, has simply never been activated. Even light outdoor wind at speeds of 5 to 10 miles per hour creates oscillation in indoor-grown stems that exceeds what those stems have ever experienced. This oscillation causes micro-tears in stem tissue and, in the worst cases, bends stems past their elastic limit, creating the permanent kink or collapse that kills some seedlings outright in their first day outside. Stress 5. Photoinhibition from light intensity. Even on a cloudy day, outdoor light intensity exceeds indoor grow light intensity significantly. Most LED grow lights used for seedling production deliver 200 to 400 micromoles of light per square meter per second. A cloudy outdoor day delivers 600 to 1,000 micromoles. A sunny outdoor day delivers 1,500 to 2,000 micromoles. When plant chloroplasts receive more light energy than they can process through photosynthesis, the excess energy causes photooxidative damage to the photosystem proteins. This is photoinhibition. It is the mechanism behind bleached, whitened leaves on seedlings moved outside too quickly. Recovery from photoinhibition requires resynthesis of damaged photosystem proteins, which takes 24 to 48 hours and uses energy the plant needs for other recovery processes simultaneously. These 5 stresses: UVB shock, transpiration mismatch, root temperature shock, wind mechanical stress, and photoinhibition, are all happening at once when a seedling is moved outside. The standard advice manages the last one, partially. Everything you do in this transition process needs to be designed around managing all 5. Section 2. Day 1. The Win-Ferris Protocol. Every conventional hardening-off guide starts with Day 1 instruction that addresses only one stress: sunlight. Most guides say, place in shade for 1 to 2 hours on Day 1. Move to a spot with indirect light. Protect from direct sun. That advice is not wrong, it just addresses the wrong stress first. The stress that causes the most damage on Day 1, and the one that is most preventable, is wind mechanical stress, not sun exposure. A seedling placed in a sheltered, shady outdoor position on Day 1 is protected from photoinhibition, but completely unprotected from the wind damage that permanently weakens or kills stems faster than any other outdoor stressor. The Wind-First protocol restructures Day 1 around managing the actual most dangerous stress. Day 1. Place seedlings in a fully sheltered outdoor position, against a house wall, inside a cold frame with the top partially open, under a table or overhang, or inside a cloche with ventilation holes, where they receive outdoor air quality and temperature variation but minimal direct air movement. Full shade is preferable for Day 1, but not essential. The absence of wind is essential. This positioning achieves 2 things simultaneously. The plant begins acclimating to outdoor humidity gradients, triggering the stomatal recalibration that reduces transpiration mismatch, and the absence of mechanical wind stress gives the stem tissue its first day of outdoor exposure without the oscillation damage that breaks down unprepared stem tissue. This one reordering of priorities: wind protection first, sun management second, prevents the stem collapse and mechanical damage that kill a significant portion of seedlings in their first outdoor day, and that the standard shade-first protocol does nothing to address. Section 3. Day 2 and 3. The stomatal recalibration window. Days 2 and 3 of the hardening-off window are the most critical phase for preventing the transpiration mismatch wilting that most growers misinterpret as a watering problem. Here is what is happening inside the leaf during this phase that almost no guide explains. When a seedling first encounters outdoor conditions, lower humidity, air movement, variable temperature, the guard cells surrounding each stomate respond by attempting to close more tightly to reduce water loss. But indoor calibrated guard cells have lost the osmotic sensitivity and structural tension that allows rapid, complete closure in response to environmental stress signals. The process of rebuilding that sensitivity, the stomatal recalibration, takes 2 to 3 days of repeated opening and closing cycles in outdoor conditions. During these 2 to 3 days, the plant is losing water faster than optimal because the stomata cannot close as efficiently as they will once recalibrated. The wilting you see on Day 2 and 3 of outdoor exposure is almost always this temporary transpiration mismatch, not drought, not root damage, not disease. The management approach for this phase: water the seedlings thoroughly before bringing them outside each day. The goal is to ensure that the root zone is at full moisture capacity before the plant faces outdoor transpiration demand. This buffer of abundant available water in the root zone compensates for the elevated water loss rate during the recalibration phase without the plant experiencing drought stress. Do not respond to wilting during this phase by dramatically increasing water. If the soil check confirms the root zone is already moist, the wilting is transpiration mismatch and will resolve as the stomata recalibrate. Adding more water to already moist soil during this phase creates the root zone moisture excess that promotes fungal disease in the root system. Bring plants inside before sunset on days 2 and 3. The indoor overnight period gives the stomata 8 hours in the familiar humidity condition. They open normally, the plant rehydrates fully, and the recalibration process continues with a fully hydrated starting point the following morning. Section 4. Managing root temperature shock. This is the transition stress that the entire hardening-off process, as conventionally taught, completely ignores, and it is the reason why plants that appear to have completed a successful hardening-off protocol still struggle in the first week after final transplanting to outdoor soil. The root temperature shock problem is distinct from the above-ground acclimatization problem. A seedling that has been hardened off for 10 days is acclimated to outdoor light, wind, and temperature above the soil surface. Its root system has not been acclimatized to outdoor soil temperature at all, because the hardening-off process was done in the same indoor potting mix the plant has been in all along. When the hardened seedling is finally transplanted from its warm indoor potting mix into cold spring outdoor soil, the root temperature shock described in Section 1 occurs at the moment of transplanting, after all the hardening-off effort, regardless of how well the above-ground transition was managed. Here is the simple technique that eliminates root temperature shock, and it is absent from every conventional hardening-off guide. Beginning 3 to 4 days before final transplanting, place the seedling containers outside in their permanent growing location, or in the position where the outdoor soil they will be transplanted into is located. During the daytime hours, the container sits on or adjacent to the outdoor soil. Heat conducted through the container base and radiated from the surrounding environment begins warming the potting mix inside the container toward the outdoor soil temperature. By the time of transplanting, the potting mix temperature has dropped from 72 degrees toward the mid to upper 50s, much closer to the outdoor soil temperature the roots will encounter at transplanting. The temperature transition the roots experience is from 58 to 52 degrees rather than from 72 to 48 degrees. The metabolic impact on root function is dramatically reduced. This positioning protocol also serves the above-ground hardening-off process. The plant continues acclimating to outdoor conditions during these final days in its permanent location, while simultaneously experiencing the root temperature transition it needs. Section 5. The UVB Tolerance Building Eschedule. UVB tolerance building is the one aspect of hardening off that the conventional protocol addresses, but it addresses it so vaguely that most growers either rush through it or do not understand what they are trying to achieve. Here is the specific biology and the schedule that produces genuine UVB tolerance rather than just sun exposure time accumulation. When plant tissue is exposed to UVB radiation, it responds by synthesizing flavonoid compounds, specifically anthocyanins and synopic acid esters, in the leaf epidermal cells. These compounds absorb UVB radiation and prevent it from reaching the deeper photosynthetic tissue, where it would cause oxidative damage. The synthesis of these compounds takes 24 to 48 hours from the first UVB exposure to reach protective concentrations. This 24 to 48-hour synthesis window means that day 1 and day 2 outdoor exposure do not fully protect the plant from day 3 levels of UVB, even if day 3's exposure intensity is only marginally higher. The tolerance is built in discrete 24 to 48-hour synthesis cycles. Each exposure triggers a new round of flavonoid synthesis that adds another layer of protection. The schedule that respects this synthesis window increases UVB exposure in increments separated by at least 24 hours rather than adding time in continuous daily progression. On day 1, provide 30 minutes of direct outdoor sun exposure in the morning, when UVB intensity is at its daily low. Return to shelter. Allow 24 hours for flavonoid synthesis. On day 3, increase to 1 hour of morning sun. Allow 24 hours. Day 5, 90 minutes, then 2 hours, increasing in 30-minute increments every 48 hours. This every other day intensity increase allows each round of UVB exposure to trigger a full flavonoid synthesis cycle before the next intensity increase arrives. The result is genuine UVB tolerance buildup rather than repeated exposure at an intensity that slightly exceeds the plant's current tolerance, which is what causes the bleaching damage that most growers accept as an unavoidable part of the hardening off process. Section 6. Wine progression. B. Yielding stem tensile strength. Wind hardening, the process of building the stem tissue density and tensile strength that allows plants to survive outdoor air movement, is the mechanical climatization process that the standard advice acknowledges least specifically. Most guides say to protect from wind for the first few days and then gradually expose. That is the right direction with entirely insufficient detail. Here is what building real wind tolerance requires. The thigmomorphogenesis response, the cellular strengthening that occurs in response to physical movement, requires repeated, consistent mechanical stimulation to trigger meaningful cell wall thickening in stem tissue. A single day of wind exposure followed by a day of indoor shelter does not accumulate the mechanical signal needed to trigger structural adaptation. The correct wind progression from day 3 of the hardening off process expose seedlings to light, variable air movement every day, not intermittently, in a position where they experience gentle outdoor breeze without gusts. The consistency of daily exposure is what drives consistent thigmomorphogenesis. Intermittent exposure followed by still indoor air slows the response. A simple technique for growers who want to accelerate wind tolerance building during the indoor phase. Before outdoor hardening off even begins, turn a small fan on the seedlings for 30 minutes twice daily during the indoor growing period. This provides the daily mechanical stimulation that triggers thigmomorphogenesis without any outdoor exposure. Seedlings that have received daily fan treatment for 2 weeks before outdoor hardening off begins have already developed measurably thicker, stronger stem tissue and require significantly less outdoor wind acclimation time. If you are reading this after your seedlings are already ready for outdoor transition and you did not use indoor fan treatment, prioritize wind protection for the first 3 outdoor days and begin gradual wind exposure no earlier than day 4 after the above-ground stress responses described in sections 2 and 3 have had time to stabilize. Section 7. Nagging photocuididism without losing transition time photoinhibition. The temporary shutdown of photosynthesis in tissue that receives more light than it can process is the stress that causes the white bleaching damage that most growers associate with the hardening off process. It is also the stress that most guides try to prevent by recommending extended periods of shade that add unnecessary days to the transition timeline. Here is the mechanism and the management approach that prevents photoinhibition without slowing down the acclimatization process. Photoinhibition occurs specifically in the upper chloroplast layers of leaf tissue that are receiving direct, overhead peak intensity sunlight. It does not occur in the same intensity when the same light reaches the leaf at a low angle early morning or late afternoon because the light path through the leaf tissue is longer at low angles, distributing the same light energy across more chloroplast layers rather than concentrating it in the uppermost layer. The practical implication: early morning outdoor exposure provides significantly lower photoinhibition risk at the same duration as midday outdoor exposure. A plant that receives 1 hour of early morning sun is experiencing a fraction of the photoinhibition stress it would experience from 30 minutes of midday sun. Even though the total light accumulation across the early morning hour may be similar, structure your UVB building schedule, described in Section 5, entirely in early morning hours for the first week of outdoor exposure. Before 9 in the morning in most climates, UVB intensity is building, but still at a fraction of its midday peak, and photosynthetically active radiation is at a level the plant can process without overloading the photosystem. At the same time, the early morning outdoor position provides the wind and humidity acclimatization that needs to happen daily, so the early morning outdoor window is simultaneously managing 3 of the 5 stresses. At appropriate intensity, move plants to a sheltered position for the remainder of the day, out of direct sun, until the 8th or 9th day of the transition when full-day outdoor exposure is appropriate. Section 8. The Recovery Nutrition Protocol. This is the section that makes the transition from indoor to outdoor measurably faster, and it is entirely absent from every standard hardening off guide. When a plant is under stress, Its metabolic priority shifts from growth and production to defense and repair. The resources it would normally allocate to root expansion, new leaf production, and photosynthetic output are redirected to repairing UVB damage in leaf tissue, resynthesizing photosystem proteins after photoinhibition events, and rebuilding the cell walls thickened by thigmomorphogenesis. This metabolic shift is protective. It is exactly what needs to happen during the stress of the outdoor transition. But it means the plant is not growing during the transition. It is recovering, and the length of the recovery phase determines how much of the early season growing window is spent in recovery versus in productive growth. The recovery nutrition protocol provides the specific building blocks for the repair processes that are occurring during the transition, so those repairs happen faster and the plant returns to productive growth sooner. The three inputs. First, a diluted kelp extract solution at 1/4 strength, applied as a root drench on day 3 and day 7 of the transition. Kelp extract provides cytokinins, the cell division hormones that accelerate root recovery, and betaines, which function as osmoprotectants that reduce cellular stress from the humidity and temperature fluctuations the plant is experiencing during transition. Apply to already moist soil, not dry soil, so the active compounds reach the root zone rather than being trapped in a drying surface layer. Second, a diluted silicon supplement applied once during the middle of the transition period. Silicon is deposited in plant cell walls and epidermis in response to silicon availability in the soil solution. Silicon-enriched cell walls are measurably more resistant to UVB penetration, more resistant to mechanical damage from wind stress, and less permeable to fungal pathogen entry, all three of which are active stress factors during the outdoor transition. Most indoor potting mixes are silicon depleted. A single diluted silicon drench during transition provides the raw material for the cell wall reinforcement that dramatically speeds recovery. Third, consistent soil moisture maintenance. This is not a supplement. It is the management baseline that allows the other inputs to function. The cellular processes of stress recovery and adaptation require abundant water. Allowing the soil to dry down even once during the transition period forces the plant to allocate recovery resources to drought stress management simultaneously, extending the total recovery timeline. Section 9, the 70 Hather window. When not to start the transition. Most guides tell you when to start hardening off, typically 2 weeks before your last frost date. What they almost never tell you is the specific weather conditions that should cause you to pause or delay the process regardless of calendar date. Starting a hardening-off transition during the wrong weather window is one of the most common causes of the permanent setback damage that growers attribute to weak seedlings or bad genetics. The plants are neither weak nor genetically inferior. They were started during a weather window that compounded the natural transition stresses with additional environmental stressors that exceeded the plant's adaptive capacity, conditions that make this the wrong week to start moving plants outside. An extended low-pressure weather pattern, the kind that brings multiple consecutive days of overcast, cold, rainy conditions, creates a cold and humid outdoor environment that is genuinely difficult for warm-season seedlings to acclimate in. Low light intensity under overcast skies is not helpful for UVB tolerance building because UVB is also reduced under cloud cover. Cold and wet conditions during the transition windows described in sections 2 through 6 prevent the stomatol recalibration, UVB building, and wind hardening from happening at adequate pace. The plant sits in low productivity conditions for a week, emerging from the overcast period without the tolerance it needed to build, and then encounters the first sunny day after the clouds clear with the same unhardened UVB tolerance it had before the cloudy week started. Wait for a forecast window with at least 5 to 7 consecutive days of variable but not all overcast conditions before starting the hardening off process. Partly cloudy days with at least 2 to 4 hours of morning sun are adequate. A fully overcast week is not. Sustained nighttime temperatures below 40 degrees for the next 7 days are also a reason to delay. 40 degrees is not frost for most seedlings, but it is cold enough to cause visible cold stress in warm season crops like tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers that sets their development back measurably even without causing death. A warming trend. A week where each day is progressively warmer and sunnier is the ideal hardening off weather window. The natural warming of the environment parallels the increasing outdoor exposure of the protocol, So the challenges increase gradually in both the environmental and the management directions simultaneously. Section 10. Special cases, balked plants from the garden center. Everything covered so far applies to seedlings you have grown yourself from seed indoors. But a large percentage of home growers buy transplants from garden centers, and the hardening-off requirement for purchased transplants is consistently misunderstood in a way that causes unexpected losses every season. Most garden centers maintain their outdoor display plants in conditions that look like fully outdoor growing. The plants are visibly outside, receiving sun and wind. What most growers do not realize is that commercial nurseries produce their transplants in temperature-controlled greenhouses and move them to outdoor display areas only weeks or days before sale. A purchased transplant that has been on an outdoor display bench at the garden center for 10 days may appear to be fully hardened off, but the greenhouse conditions it was produced in are almost identical to indoor home conditions: consistent temperature, no UVB exposure, minimal wind. The 10 days on the outdoor bench may or may not have provided adequate UVB tolerance building and wind hardening. It depends entirely on how the nursery manages the transition and what the weather was like during those 10 days, none of which you have any way to know. The safe protocol for purchased transplants assume they are not fully hardened off regardless of how the display conditions look. Apply a 5 to 7 day abridged version of the transition protocol described in this video. Not the full 10-day protocol for indoor seedlings, but not immediate outdoor transplanting either. Specifically for days 1 and 2, shelter from both wind and midday sun. Day 3 through 5, begin morning sun exposure. Day 6 and 7, allow full morning sun with afternoon shade and light wind exposure. Transplant to permanent outdoor position on day 7 or 8. This abbreviated protocol provides the most critical acclimatization steps: UVB tolerance building and stomatal recalibration, without requiring the full timeline needed for seedlings that have never been outside at all. Section 11. Recognizing transition damage and responding correctly. When the transition goes wrong, and even a well-managed transition occasionally produces unexpected damage, the grower's response in the first 24 to 48 hours determines whether the plant recovers fully or carries the setback forward into the growing season. Here are the 4 damage patterns and the correct response to each. Pattern 1. Widespread white or bleached leaf discoloration across most of the leaf surface, affecting newer leaves more than older ones. Diagnosis: photoinhibition from excessive light intensity exposure. The photosystem proteins in the upper leaf tissue have been damaged. Response: move immediately to full shade for 48 hours. Do not water extra. Do not remove the damaged leaves. The plant is already using energy to resynthesize damaged photosystem proteins. Adding more stressors by removing leaves or adjusting watering disrupts the recovery. After 48 hours in full shade, resume the UVB building schedule at the last successful exposure level, not at the level that caused the damage. Pattern 2. Uniform wilting across the plant despite adequately moist soil. Diagnosis: transpiration mismatch. Stomata have not yet recalibrated to outdoor humidity and temperature. Response: move to a sheltered, humid microenvironment, against a wall, under a cloche, or in a space with reduced airflow, and allow 1 to 2 hours of recovery before returning inside. Do not add extra water to soil that is already moist. The wilt will resolve as the stomata respond to the reduced evaporative demand of the sheltered position. Pattern 3. Stem collapse, or permanent bend at a single point mid-stem. Diagnosis: mechanical wind damage. Stem tissue exceeded its elastic limit under oscillation. This is the most serious of the 4 patterns because structural cell damage at the stem does not fully repair. Response: stake the affected stem immediately and gently. Allow the plant to continue outdoor acclimatization with the stake providing support. Most plants with a single mid-stem wind injury recover and produce a full harvest if staked before the injury progresses. Pattern 4. Dark green or blue-green discoloration on upper leaf surface with purple or bronze undertones, primarily on exposed leaves. Diagnosis: cold stress. Cells have experienced chilling damage, and the purple-bronze coloration is the accumulation of anthocyanin pigments produced as a protective cold response. Response: move plants to a protected position with overnight temperatures above 55 degrees. The anthocyanin discoloration typically fades as temperatures warm and the plant returns to normal growth. This damage is cosmetic rather than structural, and does not require special recovery treatment beyond temperature protection. Section 12. The final transition and what happens after. By day 8 to 10 of the correctly executed protocol, your plants have achieved genuine outdoor acclimatization across all 5 stresses identified in Section 1. The stomata have recalibrated. UVB tolerance compounds are present at protective concentrations in the leaf tissue. Stem tissue has received daily mechanical stimulation. Root temperature has been transitioning toward outdoor soil temperature. And the recovery nutrition inputs have provided the cellular building blocks for the stress repair processes to complete efficiently. What happens in the first week after final outdoor transplanting for correctly hardened plants versus incorrectly or minimally hardened ones is the payoff that makes the entire investment in this protocol worthwhile. An incorrectly hardened plant transplanted outdoor soil spends its first 7 to 14 days in transplant shock, visible as halted growth, wilted or yellow lower leaves, and no new growth emerging from the growing tip. During this period, the plant is not growing. It is surviving. A correctly hardened plant transplanted at the same time shows minimal transplant stress. New growth is typically visible from the growing tip within 3 to 4 days of final transplanting. The root system, already acclimatized to outdoor soil temperature, begins expanding into the surrounding soil immediately. The plant is in the ground and growing rather than in the ground and recovering. That difference in the first 2 weeks after transplanting compounds through the season. A plant that starts growing immediately after transplanting is 2 to 3 weeks ahead of a same-age plant that spent those weeks in transplant shock in terms of root development, canopy size, and time to first harvest. Every hour invested in managing the 5 stresses correctly during the 10-day transition pays back in weeks of earlier, more productive growth. The process protects what you have already built. 8 weeks of seedling care indoors deserves a careful transition. The plants you have grown deserve the 10 days it takes to move them correctly into the world they will produce in.